Let me tell you, this is one of the most incredible stories from the world of finance. It's a story about what happens when one person has the courage to see what everyone else simply refuses to.
Picture this. It's September 2008. The global financial system, this massive machine built over centuries, is literally on fire. Panic is spreading across the entire globe. Fortunes built over lifetimes are just gone in an instant.
But in the middle of all that chaos, in a quiet little office in California, one man was staring at his computer screen. And on that screen was a number that just seemed impossible. His fund, it had an annual return of over 489%. So you've got to ask yourself, how in the world did anyone pull this off while the world was burning down? Who was this guy who didn't just survive the crash, but actually made a fortune from it? Well, that's the story we're going to unpack today.
Well, his name was Michael Burry. And to get how he did it, you really have to understand he was a total, complete outsider.
I mean, this guy was the polar opposite of your typical Wall Street titan. First off, Burry was a 32-year-old doctor who'd actually quit his neurosurgery training. He lost his left eye to cancer when he was a kid, which made him really uncomfortable with things like eye contact and big, crowded rooms. So while everyone else was out networking and shaking hands, he was alone, building this incredible reputation by giving out investment advice online.
And that right there, that's the whole game. It shows you the fundamental difference in how he operated. You see, Wall Street ran on meetings, on groupthink, on this shared, almost blind optimism. But Burry's world, it was completely different. For him, it wasn't about what people said. It was about the raw, cold data. He was obsessed with the numbers, with a fine print buried in hundreds and hundreds of pages of contracts. He believed that's where the truth was hiding.
So because he had this unique focus, this obsession, really, with sitting alone with the data, he stumbled onto a discovery that would end up shaking the entire world. He started reading the very things that everyone else was happily ignoring. He started digging into these things called mortgage-backed securities. Now, by 2003, the U.S. housing market was absolutely roaring. Banks were taking thousands of individual home loans, packaging them up into these super complex products, and then selling them to investors on Wall Street. So how did this whole house of cards get built? Well, it basically went like this. It all started with banks giving out ridiculously risky loans. We're talking subprime loans, often to people with no proof of income. Then, thousands of these bad loans got bundled together and sold to investors as quote-unquote safe assets. The entire system was just a ticking time bomb, a pyramid built on one single flawed idea, that house prices would never, ever go down. So around 2004, Burry decided to do something that honestly seems kind of crazy. He did the one thing nobody on Wall Street who was actually selling these things was doing. He sat down and he read the fine print. Not the summaries, not the pamphlets, but thousands and thousands of pages of the actual individual mortgage contracts that made up these securities. And what he found buried in all that legal jargon? Well, it led him to make the single biggest, most mind-blowing gamble of his life. He decided he was going to bet everything he had on a total collapse of the system. Now, here's the catch. You couldn't just, click a button to bet against the housing market. That tool didn't really exist. So he had to get creative. He went to the biggest banks on Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, you name it, with a very, very strange request. He asked them to create a special financial instrument for him, a credit default swap. To put it simply, it's basically an insurance policy. The bankers were a little confused at first, and then they pretty much smiled. To them, this was free money. Burry would pay them regular insurance premiums, and in return, if the housing market collapsed, which they all thought was completely impossible, they'd owe him billions. They took the bet. And look, he didn't just test the waters. He went all in. He took almost all of his fund's capital, we're talking $1.3 billion, and poured every cent into these swaps. He bet the farm. But, there's a saying, being early is the same as being wrong. And for a while there, that's exactly how it felt for Burry. He was right, but he was early. And what came next was this long, agonizing period where he was completely, utterly alone against the entire financial world. For 2 long, agonizing years, the market just kept climbing,
completely defying his logic. And all the while, Burry's fund was just bleeding cash, paying out millions and millions in these insurance premiums. His investors? They started to panic. The angry phone calls began. They threatened to sue him. One of them actually did. The pressure on him was just immense.
So what do you do when the entire world is screaming that you're wrong? Well, if you're Michael Burry, you do the only thing you know how to do. He cut off communication, locked his office door, and just kept his head down, kept following the numbers, trusting his own research over the screams of the market and even his own angry investors.
And then it happened. It started slowly in 2007, just a few cracks in the foundation. But by 2008, the whole thing came crashing down. The vindication he was waiting for finally came, but it came at a truly terrible price for the rest of the world.
September 15th, 2008. That's the day the music stopped. Lehman Brothers, a giant, a 158-year-old institution, was just gone, bankrupt. Overnight. The stock market cratered. The dominoes just started to fall, one after another. Millions of people would lose their jobs, their homes, their life savings. And amidst all that carnage, Michael Burry sat there and looked at his screen. And there it was, that impossible number, a 489% return. His personal profit from the whole thing was over $100 million. He closed his fund, gave the money back to his now very, very wealthy investors, and he just walked away.
But you'd think this would be a moment of pure triumph, right? It wasn't that simple. He said in an interview later on that being right is inseparable from being alone, and that kind of profound loneliness, it changes a person. It was a massive intellectual victory for sure, but a deeply isolating one.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? What can we learn from his story? It's not just some technical investment tip. It's something much deeper. History shows that before every single great bubble bursts, someone, somewhere, sees the danger coming. But the crowd, totally blinded by profit, almost always ignores them. Burry's story is this incredible reminder of the value of being a contrarian, of looking where nobody else is looking, of asking uncomfortable questions, and maybe, most important of all, of doing your own homework. And that, of course, leaves us with one big looming question for right now. Michael Burry saw the housing bubble. So, what's the bubble today? Is it in housing again? Is it artificial intelligence, crypto? Or is it something else entirely, just hiding there in plain sight, waiting in the fine print, for someone to actually sit down and read it?